this is the time where we have about 20-25 minutes or so for any questions for any of our presenters today. And I kind of hate that we're not live and we can't see each other. So if you have a question, I would say raise your hand and I'll call on you. And we can see your face. You can ask your question yourself to us, so it's a little more interactive and I'm not just reading questions from the chat. So do the hand raise option if you're a participant, and I should be able to see that to call on you to then prompt you to turn on your camera, unmute your microphone, and ask your question to us directly. But while people are thinking of their questions, there was one from this morning that we didn't get answered. So I think this is for Francis and Sarah Barget. How many years do we need to follow such research plots, so your common garden studies, in order to test predictions? Is that something?
Yeah, I'll take that. That's species dependent. So, you know, we got to do what we can. You know, all of these things are based off of what data we can get, as opposed to what data would be ideal. Ideally, we would like to see the whole life of the plant, but that is very difficult in most situations. So with some projects, we're trying to follow it as long as possible. With the Blue Bunch project that I presented, that project will go on as long as we possibly can have it go on. We've already had some common gardens drop out due to, there are a couple of, one was due to land ownership issues, but all the rest are due to survival. And so we've gotten several common gardens where we've lost almost all of the plants. So I guess it all really depends. One of the things that's been really interesting to find out with sagebrush is that it's a very long-lived plant, and even there are some common gardens of sagebrush that have been looked at kind of much later. And what we found is that local adaptation seems to be even more prevalent in long-term studies. So, and that's really key. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're trying to predict what might be best, and but we can't ever know until we at least get kind of a long-term data set based on the life of the plant.
Thanks, Francis. Lynx has their hand raised, so I'm going to give permission for them to talk and see how this goes. All right,
Hi. Yeah, I just had some questions about the last presentation, and I'm working out here in Hawaii, and we do outplanting. It's not my wheelhouse necessarily, but just had some quick questions around the seedling and prisons program concerning, like, do you guys send them your seeds so that they have a local source and then they redistribute them? And then what it looked like as far as, are you guys looking at host soil types and bringing that soil to the prisons, or even in your own outplantings, are you using that homegrown soil or whatnot for your outplantings? And then the last thing, just as far as like when you're plugging the seedlings in, do you guys disturb the root mass or leave it in that kind of conical shape? And have you looked into that at all? It's kind of a bunch of questions in one.
Shannon, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So some of it I might have to defer to Valda a little bit, but we do get the seed from the BLM, and that seed is either collected near the targeted restoration area or it is from a seed transferable zone. So it really kind of depends on the number of plants that the BLM is looking and the amount of acreage that they're looking to restore. Valda, it's great working with her because her seed is always collected like right next to where the plant babies are going to go. Sometimes it's serendipitous because she collects it and then, you know, a fire goes through and then it has to be planted. But other offices, it's, you know, after the fact, a huge fire has gone through and they just need seed now. So like, you know, the Martin Fire, Sarah, you talked a little bit about the Martin Fire. It's the largest fire in Nevada's history. And so we're growing a lot of plants for that. And those are all from a transferable seed zone. Val, did you want to add anything about seed? Okay, then I'm going.
Well, sorry, you pretty much covered the seed part. As far as disturbing the root of it when we plant it, I personally give the seedling just a little twist and try and get the roots just a little bit, kind of like you'd plant a tomato plant in your garden. But we use augers to dig the holes. We have very volcanic soils. In some spots, it just doesn't work. In other spots, it works great. But yeah, the auger breaks up the soil in the hole, and then it makes it easier to plant the seedling. And you just want to make sure that you don't have air pockets in there when you're planting. So in the answer to the last part of your question is yes, I do disturb the root a little bit.
Yeah, I was just curious about like if there was any study of like a consistent technique, because as I have done some outplantings, I just see a wide variety of like just throw it in the ground and, you know, pack it in or water it in, or if you guys look into that at all, or if you know of any literature that would be helpful around that.
I have not read any literature on it. I pretty much just go out and do it. But I do try and show the new interns and crews that one big thing is just to make sure you don't have a lot of air pockets in your hole, and that should help. Sometimes we even, if we're in an area, we'll even throw like a horse or burro dropping in the hole. You never know, might help, can't hurt.
So there actually is a, the Forest Service has put out this like, I don't know, 9 or 11 steps to properly planting a tree seedling. And it's the same with shrubs. I don't know if any of you have seen that, where it's got the little diagrams of, you know, don't make a J root and no L roots and make sure you tamp it down and no air pockets. I can try to find that and send it.
Yeah, we have a place here. If we get it to the folks at Natural Areas within our symposium, we can add files. So,
okay, I will look for that. And then there was some questions about soil. So we're growing hundreds of thousands of sagebrush plants, and so trying to bring soil in is a little bit of a nightmare. So we actually use peat moss, which is not, it's a peat moss mix. It's not the most sustainable. We've tried a few other things. And originally, Valda, I don't know if you remember, but we would ask that the BLM provided 5-gallon buckets of native soil to actually try to inoculate the soil with mycorrhizae. And it actually ended up just being a huge pain in the butt of trying to get the soil in and then get it into prison. And then some years we just couldn't get it because the roads were too muddy, or some years we just introduced a whole bunch of weed seed to everything. And so we've kind of abandoned using the native soil. And as far as using just the native soil, it's just, we're growing too many plants to go out and dig a hole in the desert and grab soil. Did that answer your question?
That did. It was a bit loaded. I was curious about the mycorrhizae and just the soil types as far as like the, you know, the subtle genetics of, you know, of localized plant stock. So yeah, that definitely did. And yeah, I can only imagine it being both a biosecurity and an actual security nightmare to get a bunch of dirt in and out of these areas. So yeah, thank you so much. And definitely it's enlightening. And I'm very interested to see that literature on the shrubs and tree planting.
Okay, I'm on it.
Just a quick thing. There is some literature that talks about arbuscular mycorrhizae and sagebrush, and there does seem to be some help, but it's very difficult to operationalize it.
Thanks, Francis. Yeah, there was a question about research on soil mycorrhizae and microbial communities at sagebrush sites and that being a factor in success, but I think you guys touched on that. So does anyone else have any questions? Like I said, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'm monitoring both right now. I guess I will put it out there for those folks that are participating. Is there anything you need us to elaborate on or define in more detail that you heard today? Is there any innovative ways that you have used native seed in your part of the US? Because I know we are very Great Basin focused, but we're always looking for new ideas too. So is there anything you'd like to share with us in innovative ways you've been using native seeds in other parts of the country? And I think this is why it gets weird with these virtual conferences. I'm trying, guys. So
It looks like Peggy Olwell raised her hand again, unless that was a mistake.
Peggy, I'll give you control.
A few more there too, Sarah.
Peggy, I think you're unmuted if you want to ask a question.
We can't hear you, Peggy.
Peggy, did you have a question?
How about Patricia? She has her hand raised as well.
All right, Patricia, I'm going to give you the mic. Hey, Patricia, you should be able to talk. Okay, maybe we're having technical difficulties and people are talking and we just can't hear.
I wonder if, yeah, Patricia is trying to talk, but we're not hearing her.
Try again, Patricia.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I got an option to unmute me. So, okay, so thank you and for this great symposium. I wonder, in sort of trying to look at this big picture, and certainly we can explore this in the Steward Circle on Friday, how do we connect the important information, which was, you know, forest focused yesterday, with what's happening here? Because I feel like there's some really, there's two main things. Some useful information that's been generated by that whole stewardship process. I love the measures and indicators, their restoration economy and the way they're trying to build those, you know, things on the ground and building that into their MOU. But seems to be just such a disconnect between that effort and this type of a program. And and of course, this is not based in a forest, but I just wish we could find ways to bridge that gap a little bit. And maybe that's not a question, but just a thought I'm throwing out there. I'd welcome your ideas on that.
So I guess, Patricia, are you referencing the shared stewardship agreements that Forest Service is doing with different agencies across the country?
Yeah, that they spoke about yesterday, for sure.
Okay, so I can only speak for Nevada because that's where I sit and work. So we do have a shared stewardship agreement here in Nevada. And one of the strategies that did get accepted as part of that shared stewardship agreement was the Nevada native seed strategy. Because, Nevada has a lot more shrub communities, I would say, than forest communities, even though we do have forests as well. So I think maybe at least here, maybe there's some connection, but I don't know if that native seed, native plant connection is in every one of those agreements. And I agree with you, it would be great to connect those dots.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Another question from the chat. Francis or Fred, you might be able to answer this one. I know the Great Basin Native Plant Project does a lot of collaborative research. Do you have any programs to support commercial seed producers, such as sharing tech or equipment?
Go ahead, Francis.
I'll talk first, and maybe Fred can kind of say what he has to say. So there's been a lot of sharing of seed over the years, and certainly kind of any technological aspects that come out of the research, but we don't share equipment or we don't really have very much equipment ourselves, certainly not in an operational sense, but we do share, we've done a lot of work on cultivation practices, and we share plant materials and those kinds of things. So we definitely interact with producers and share information that would help them grow. Fred could talk more about kind of the contracting side of things.
Oh, I just wanted to point out the FORB manual. So GBNPP has been consolidating all the production practices for FORBs and putting it into one space, into a series of documents. Nancy Shaw and Corey Gucker are working on that. So that's really exciting, and that should be a really big leg up for producers who are interested in transitioning and growing some of these FORBs.
I can link that on the chat here in a second.
I'm wondering if that question was also about whether there's been interest on the grower side or interest from your side in creating a space where growers could exchange equipment and stuff with each other. It sounded like there was a little bit of that in there. I don't know if that's occurred anywhere.
I haven't seen any, potentially in Oregon, there's been some seed cooperatives that have shared resources, but I think it's more of a local kind of thing. And I don't think it would be necessarily tied to the GBNPP. I haven't seen it outside of Oregon though, but I think it's a great idea. I mean, it would be smart for producers or producers that are interested to band together and create these seed cooperatives.
All right, we have another hand raised. I'm going to unmute.
Hi, me again, Patricia. So, the conversation that you were just having, there's a few on this session here that were in another conversation with me the other day. And I think the first thing that I'm hearing is that I do think it seems like it's time for us to have a confab, like a big meeting that really explores the various, whether it's the 6 stages of the native plant materials development to try to figure out what's the latest and how can we share this information and make everybody aware. But also, so there's that, but also something I knew from a while back was that like the Native Seed Network attempts to do something like that, to sort of create a directory or seed warehouse or whatever. But there are trust issues. There are business privacy, like business issues, like the way some companies say special ingredients, and they don't tell you the details. So anyway, I think that comes into play with this attempt to try to share information on native seed availability amongst the industry.
So I want to echo that. I've given several talks to the American Seed Trade Association. It's their native seed group up in Boise. They usually have it every other year. And there are, it's competition. And so there is, there are some growers that have figured it out, and, why should they share, right? So there is that going on, in general, and maybe Peggy can speak to this, because this has been the mantra from seed industry for a while, that, just give us the seed, we can do it. So I don't know. But I do think, it is, the other trend that is worth thinking about and is how do we foster, well, these companies are getting bigger and bigger. There's a lot of them that are buying each other. They see the economics, they see the economic returns, and so they're consolidating. Diversity is probably in our best interest. And so, as a group, we should also be thinking about how do we foster local seed production? And how do we outreach to farmers? I know that's something that's big in a big part of the Nevada Native Seed Strategy, and Department of Ag and our partners are interested in that. And how do you kind of create that homegrown industry? Oregon has been very successful at that.
All right, Peggy, I think your mic should be live if you wanted to comment on that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I do. I think that there's several of the large seed industry folks that I have asked them if they wanted to do research and help us grow stuff, but they really do want to keep that secret. And I said, well, we the federal government cannot pay you to do research for us that doesn't belong to the American people, and that you have to make it known. So, I mean, in those instances where we were talking about it, they were not interested. I totally agree that we need to foster the local seed production at the local level. And I've been having some discussions with some folks over on the East Coast about, whether using that local farm to table idea is the way that would help us, because the big seed industry wants something from, Cape Cod to California, and we want something that is locally adapted. And I think we need to, we could foster the economy in the local area where we need it, and hopefully provide funding for farmers. But I like the idea of cooperatives. I think it's a great idea. And sharing equipment, etc. And just so that everybody knows, the Native Seed Network, this was what we tried I don't know how long ago we started it, but it was funded through our program. And American Seed Trade Association was very upset with a small native seed association, and they basically tried to get rid of them, and they did. And then they also didn't want to share the prices for their by pound for the seed, because that was their, they were bidding on things with BLM and other federal agencies, and they didn't want us to know how many pounds of it they had, nor how much. We wanted transparency with the agents, with the industry, but that's not the way the free market works. So those are my comments. And I don't know, did you hear me the last time when I had a question?
No, we couldn't hear you. So you might want to ask that one again.
Oh, God. Okay, so I just wanted to give a shout out to the Sagebrush and Prisons program and thank them, and just let folks know that there was an article in Audubon magazine, March of 2020, that talks all about the effect of this program on the prisoners and the sage grouse. So it was really humbling for me and palpable to see when I went into the prisons with the folks from Institute for Applied Ecology to see how this program was affecting these prisoners. And I was amazed about how us getting into the prisons with this program is really the outreach into those families of people that we would not have any contact with in our normal way, normal life, that it's getting the importance of plants, plant conservation, sage grouse, sagebrush back out into the American public that we might not connect with. They wouldn't be coming to our natural areas meeting. They wouldn't be hearing the science, et cetera. So thanks, guys. And then I had a question for Jeff Ott about the native seed mixes that he was analyzing and wondering whether those were locally source identified or were they cultivars. And I don't know if Jeff is still on or.
I'm here, yeah. Those were mostly cultivars. This was 20 years ago, and the native locally sourced materials weren't as developed as they are now. So
yeah,
what was going on.
Thanks.
That does bring up another issue, Peggy, and that's that, these were native plants that were not local, so we don't know how well that would have done with local plants.
Exactly. Yep. Thanks.
And Peggy, I think, Sarah's study is really the first study to do that, using seed that was increased by Rob Burton, Winnemucca BLM, that's locally collected. So we need more of those.
But we need more of Jeff's too. That 20-year monitoring is super crucial, and you'll always get to that 20-year mark and look back and be like, why didn't we do this? It's like, oh, you couldn't. So
yeah,
props to both those for sure.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I think it's about that time to wrap things up. So I'm not sure who from Natural Areas is going to jump back on and close us out.
That would be me.
Right on time.
And thanks, everybody. This was a really fantastic symposium. I'm so excited that we were able to record it and that we will have it posted for everybody. I've kept track of all the citations and the resources that have come out of this, and we will have those under the Files tab, which is next to the Chat tab, by tomorrow at some point. Just need to get those added. And yes, thank you. And this brings us to the end of the day. So as Sarah said earlier, let's pick this conversation back up again at the Steward Circle on Friday. Sarah will be, Peggy and Patricia will be facilitating that Steward Circle. And I'm sure, now that we'll all come home to sit and roost for a little bit for a couple of days. And I would invite all of the presenters to be a part of that Steward Circle because folks may show up with more questions for you. So thank you for that. I also want to remind you to share your thoughts and comments with us by completing the evaluation poll associated with each session. And that can be found as one of the tabs next to the Chat tab and the Files tab there on the conference website under the symposium. Please, if anybody participated in yesterday's symposium, please go back and make sure you fill that poll out, and then know that all of the pre-recorded sessions that opened on that were available on October 1st also have polls associated with them. So if you listen to somebody's talk and you get a chance to just take a minute to fill that out for us, it would be tremendously helpful. It is through your input that we can continue to improve. And if and when we do this again, we'll do it better. So tomorrow morning, I hope you'll join us at noon Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Pacific Time for a keynote presentation by Ben Goldfarb. Ben will be sharing his discoveries from the book Eager, the surprising secret life of beavers and why they matter. And if you haven't read that book and you're a natural history buff, I highly recommend it. Following Ben's presentation, everybody will be invited to join us in the exhibit hall for live discussions with our poster presenters. We have 11 posters available this year, and their authors will be in their booths ready to engage with all of you. So don't let them be lonely there. And then last but not least, we'll host our third symposium tomorrow, the Quaking Aspen Challenge, Applied Conservation in Keystone Communities. Have a great afternoon and evening, and we will look forward to seeing you all here again tomorrow. Thank you.